There are winnable games on the schedule this year for Purdue football, but there's also season defining games and games that don't just define this year, but could define the future of Purdue football.
You are Locked On Boilermakers, your daily podcast on the Purdue Boilermakers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome in to another episode of Locked On Boilermakers here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Now, the number one sports podcast network where it's your team every day. As always, I'm your host. I am Nick Arvin. I'm talking Boilermakers every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network, the only daily Purdue show out there. And today we have an exciting episode because we're getting into the games that might not just define Purdue season, games that are winnable, but games this year that could legitimately decide the future of Purdue football. That's what we're leading out with here in the opening segment. We will then get into week 5 of our game previews as we're continuing to make our way through all 12 of Purdue's games. Just less than 2 weeks now from Purdue kickoff in a week 1 against Indiana State. We'll finish off today's episode with our weekly edition of Boilermaker Buy, Sell, Hold. So it's going to be a fun one, and I want to jump right into things today. And I want to explain exactly what I mean when I say games that could decide the future of Purdue, because this year's pivotal. And I don't need to be the one to tell you that. Everybody that keeps up with Purdue football understands what is on the line right now for Purdue, because last year Barry Odom did not live up to the expectation of starting out strong in year 1 of taking over the Boilermakers. And obviously he was not left a very good situation. So how much is there for him to take? How much blame does Barry Odom take for last year? That answer is kind of dependent on who you ask, right? But then you move in to year 2. Now you move into 2026, and this year now becomes a season for Purdue where Barry Odom is going to start being judged. The results of this season are going to be results of Barry Odom, because he went on the podium at Big Ten Media Days and he says, I have all the resources I need to succeed at Purdue. So if you're going to say that, if you're going to take the excuses out of the conversation, then you have to expect criticism that comes along with that if Purdue doesn't do good. Now, on the flip side of that, if Purdue wins some of these games I'm about to tell you about, this could be a program that is widely seen as one going in the right direction, taking a step in the right direction. And from then you understand that Barry Odom is likely the future of Purdue football. So these games are defining of not just this season, but also the future of Purdue as it pertains to the perspective of Barry Odom from Purdue fans, and as it pertains to Barry Odom's future at Purdue, because we have a new athletic director now. Tommy McClelland is coming in, and sometimes you'll see athletic directors bring their guys in if there's not stability at head coach. There's a lot of moving pieces, and for the Barry Odom fans out there, you want to see this season be one of stability, and it really starts out week 2 in my mind. I don't think there's a more defining game on Purdue's schedule than what's going to kick off week 2 at Ross-Ade, because the Wake Forest Demon Deacons come to town September 12th. That's going to be a noon kickoff game at Ross-Ade, and it is one of the defining ones of Purdue's season, because you have to chalk up Indiana State to being a win. And then you face off against a team in Wake Forest where ESPN has that game, take it what you will, but their matchup predictor has Purdue at 43%, a slight underdog to win that game. Honestly, I think that's fair, because I expect it to be competitive for Purdue. I don't think they'll be the favorite heading into that one. A Wake Forest team that won 9 games last year, but a Wake Forest team that, in my opinion, is beatable for Purdue. A game at home in Ross-Ade, and we'll get to what a loss would mean when we talk about the next game coming up. But this is defining for so many reasons. It's defining because you have the opportunity in your first matchup against a Power 4 school to set the standard, and this is going to be a team of momentum this year for Purdue. That's what we've seen the last couple of years as well. But bad starts to the season have consistently kind of spiraled, and it seems like Purdue's gotten worse as the season progresses. So what better way to deal with that issue than winning in week 2? Starting out 2-0 on the year, winning one of your first Power 4 games in years. It's against a Wake Forest team, new quarterback. You've got Gio Lopez, who comes over from North Carolina, will now be the starter for Wake Forest. I see this as a beatable team, and I think that this is a must-win game because then the following week, you go on the road to Pasadena, play up against Bob Chesney and the new-look UCLA Bruins. This is a game as well where, in theory, that one is winnable against UCLA. Kind of a new identity, a new era of UCLA Bruin football. Say what you want about Bob Chesney. I don't think he's going to be Kurt Cignetti the way people are making him out to be, but he brings a dang good running back in Wayne Knight. They still have Nico. UCLA has a lot of pieces on the offensive side of the ball. So although this seems like a winnable game in terms of Big Ten standards, going to the West Coast, that's tough. And that's not one that I would necessarily predict Purdue to win, although I think it is one of those defining ones if Purdue could win it. But no matter what, you don't want to start out 1-2. Both of these games are must win to a certain extent. The first game against Wake Forest is must win because I don't know if you're going to be able to beat UCLA. And if you lose to Wake Forest, then on the road against UCLA, that game becomes a must win because the following weeks you have Notre Dame and Illinois, two games that are going to be very, very tough for Purdue to win. We'll preview the Illinois one on the other side of the first segment. I don't want to start out 1-4, and that's the reality you're staring at if you lose to both UCLA and Wake Forest. So in my mind, both of these games are defining a Purdue season. These first 3 weeks, much like they were last year, are defining to the overall success of Purdue, but this year even more so because you play two Power 4 schools in the first 3 weeks. Purdue has to start out 2-1. That's non-negotiable. They have to start out 2-1 if this season is going to be that step in the right direction, the way that I mentioned. I do think the Boilermakers get a win over Wake Forest. Not sure about UCLA, but there's also a situation where at the ceiling, this is a football team that starts out 3-0. That's why these first couple of weeks are so crucial towards Purdue's overall success throughout the course of the season. Why they are these defining games. Going forward to the rest of the schedule, once you get past Notre Dame and Illinois, both of those games likely will be losses for Purdue. I think that's pretty realistic. You have Minnesota, and Minnesota's an interesting one for me, especially depending on that outcome against UCLA. Let's say, for the sake of my argument, that Wake Forest and Indiana State, those are wins, but then you lose 3 in a row against UCLA, Notre Dame, and Illinois. At that point, I feel like Minnesota becomes a very defining game, or more so than it already was, because not only do you have the opportunity to start out 3-3, but if you lose against UCLA, then that's that opportunity for your first conference win and to kind of get out of the basement of the Big Ten, the way that we've seen Purdue the last couple of years. Now, ESPN does have Purdue as a 52% favorite to win that one as we sit right now. I'm sure those numbers will be adjusted as the season plays out. Minnesota is a team that is extremely beatable at home in my mind. Obviously, PJ Fleck always putting up 7-5 seasons, so better than what Purdue has been the past couple of years, but that's a game that Purdue should have won last year. They were leading that game for a portion of the matchup, gave it away at the end. At home this year for Purdue, with a defense that should be a little bit better with Ryan Browne at the helm, who shouldn't turn the ball over as much, that should be a win. And that would be a win, especially if Purdue starts out 2-1. That would be huge overall, because then you're 500 going into the back half of the season when you have more defining matchups. I think that Maryland is a win, but that's not one that I'm going to list as a defining matchup. The last game of the year, which I think is truly a defining matchup, you could throw Washington in there at home. We've mentioned West Coast trip on a short week. Could that have something to play for a Washington team that will certainly be better on paper than Purdue? I'm not sure. I think that's a win for the Huskies, so I'm not going to call that one a defining matchup just because I don't think that's a very likely win for Purdue. A game I think is a defining matchup is the second to last week, the week before the bucket game, November the 21st, right before Thanksgiving, against Wisconsin, against the Badgers. And this is one that in my schedule prediction, a lot of people gave me crap for this because they said, no way Purdue beats Wisconsin. Look at the last time Purdue beat Wisconsin, which was 2003. It's been a minute, but Wisconsin usually has good football teams, which is why this becomes a defining game. You look at Big Ten, you look at Big Ten football, Wisconsin is one of the prestigious programs. Wisconsin is one that if you find someone off the street that doesn't know anything about college football, they'd be able to point at that logo and tell you what the school is. Wisconsin has history in college football. So if Purdue can go up against Wisconsin, whether a bowl game is on the line or not. You'd have to pull up an upset earlier in the season, whether this is for 4 wins, 5 wins, or 6 wins. No matter the case, if you're playing up against Wisconsin, that is a game that is defining for Purdue's future. Because if you get a win against a program with the caliber of Wisconsin, even in a down year, which I expect them to see this year with an offense that has a ton of question marks, Luke Fickell, a bunch of question marks on it, if he's the guy. If you beat Wisconsin, that is a huge win going into the offseason. That is a win that you could hang your hat on, and a win that Barry Odom can use and say, hey, we beat Wisconsin. We beat a team that this program hasn't beaten since 2003. That is a big-time win for this program. We are taking a step in the right direction. So you can say whatever you want. You can predict the rest of the games however you want. Going into week 11 or week 12, I guess it would be with that bye. Wisconsin, defining game. Absolutely defining game for the future of Purdue. If they can pull that off, I feel like everyone has to have an optimistic outcome on, or outlook on, the outcome of the overall season. But we'll see, because as I said, football less than 2 weeks away at this point for Purdue. They will play Indiana State at Ross Ade in just 2 Fridays from today. I can't wait for that. But we're continuing our preview series coming up here next, getting into the week 5 matchup against Illinois. Is that one Purdue can pull an upset in? That's coming up here next on Locked On Boilermakers. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Odoo, because running a business shouldn't feel like you're trying to connect a bunch of systems that were never designed to work together. One app for accounting, another for inventory, another for sales, and somehow none of them seem to talk to each other. Well, that's where Odoo comes in, because Odoo is an all-in-one business management software that brings every part of your business together in one powerful platform. From sales and accounting to inventory and marketing, everything works in one place. Odoo is one platform to manage, grow, and scale your business. The best organizations know that success isn't just about talent. It's about having everyone working towards the same goal. And that's true in sports, just like it is in business. This year, we'll need Purdue football to operate like Odoo. The athletic department working with the coaches working with the players, getting it all working in one system so Purdue can take that step in the right direction, because great organizations win because operations matter. And that's why you should get Odoo. Try for free today at odoo.com/lockedon. That's odoo.com/locked on. This time last year, when we were previewing Purdue's schedule for 2025, we looked at the same stretch where it's Notre Dame, it's Illinois, it's Minnesota. In those 2 games, Notre Dame and Illinois, those were the ones that stuck out as just unwinnable for Purdue. Being quite honest with you, Notre Dame was a great team, much like they will be this year. But last year, Illinois was my dark horse to just make this run in the Big Ten, because they had Hank Beatty, they had Luke Altmaier, they had Gage Koss on the defensive side of the ball. There were a ton of options last year for Illinois, and a ton of key players in the premier positions you need to find success as a football team. And ultimately, kind of what I thought was going to happen happened last year for Purdue against Illinois, where it was that shootout where Illinois just had more weapons. They had more opportunities to score, and therefore ended up beating Purdue. This year, I would still say that Illinois is a team that not many people will predict Purdue to beat, and I don't think Purdue will beat Illinois, but it will be a closer game this year. Let me tell you why. So last year, Illinois up 43-27 after 4 quarters against Purdue. Luke Altmaier had 390 passing yards. Also, this was a crazy Ryan Browne performance, 30 of 50. He threw the ball twice as many times as Luke Altmaier and had almost 100 less yards at 302, 1 touchdown in the game. Michael Jackson III had a big game, but it was Hank Beatty, 186 receiving yards last year. That haunted me for a couple of days after that Luke Altmaier to Hank Beatty connection. But now both of those guys are no longer with the Illini in 2026. The 2 guys that beat Purdue really bad last year are no longer with the Illini. I believe our friends at FanDuel have their win total hovering right around 6.5 wins. Last year, I want to say it was 7 or 8, so certainly down from the marks that they were last year. This isn't going to be the same Illinois team. This is going to be an Illinois team that, unlike having Luke Altmaier last year and unlike having Hank Beatty, they are going to have to rely a lot heavier on the run game this year. That's going to be a bit of a change for Brent Bielema, and I'm not sure how well it's going to work. Now, Illinois typically a solid rushing team, and they do retain a decent amount of the running backs. Ca'lil Valentine will be back this year for Illinois and is kind of that feature back as I see him for Illinois. But in my mind, the question marks start to become the passing game, because the running game's great. And this is going to be key for Purdue as well this year. The running game's great. If you have Ca'lil Valentine, who rushed for 600 yards last year, and if he's able to produce similar to that mark or even take that jump, you're going to be in a good position. But you bring in Caden Hauser over from Eastern Carolina. You don't necessarily have that wide receiver one right now. The pass protection is a little bit of a concern for Illinois on the offensive line. Is this going to be a team that's going to be versatile enough to be able to take care of business and surpass that? Win 7, win 8, win 9 games. Right now, I'm not sure. I think there are a lot of question marks around Illinois, and I think it's going to be a better matchup for Purdue because Purdue is a very heavy rushing attack. That's what it's going to be in 2026. I think that Ryan Browne's going to do a better job of taking care of the football this year, which is definitely going to be a positive note for Purdue, not just against Illinois, but in general. But if Purdue's able to establish that running game early, I think they can keep it close, unlike how they did last year. Now, this will still be a game. I do want to get out in front of this and mention that Illinois is going to be the favorite to win this one. But unlike last year, where I just kind of expected Illinois to get in and run away with the game, similar to how it actually played out, this is 1-26. I do expect Purdue to be able to hang around until the second half because Illinois isn't going to throw a ton of balls. They're going to throw it, but I don't know if they're going to have the success the way that that Illinois had last year with Luke Altmaier, with Hank Beatty. I just don't see that quite yet. If Purdue can stop Ca'lil Valentine, they're going to have a chance to compete in this game. Now, with that being said, this is going to be coming off UCLA. This is going to be coming off of Notre Dame. So if you look at the downside, let's say worst case scenario for Purdue is they lose this game. In my former scenario where Purdue does end up beating both Indiana State and Wake Forest in the first 2 weeks of the season, this isn't a must-win game by any stretch of the imagination for Purdue in the way that I see it in terms of what I deem a success, which is just improving off of the last couple of years. This Illinois game is not a must-win if you do win 2 of your first 3. But if you lose those games, if you start out 1-3 in the season, this is a game now where Purdue has to put all their chips in the middle. Purdue has to go all in on beating Illinois in this one. Would that fare better for the Boilermakers? Would that urgency fare better for Purdue? I think it might. And I hate to say that because I don't want Purdue to end up in that situation. I don't want the Boilermakers, and I think it would be bad to have your backs against the wall and to have to play up against a team like Illinois in order to get your season on the right trajectory. But I think in that scenario where Purdue loses against all the opponents, those 2 defining games to start out the year, and then the loss against Notre Dame, I do think there becomes a scenario where this Illinois game also depended on how Illinois starts the year, because we don't know how good they're going to be. Yes, there are a lot of question marks on the offensive side of the ball. Are they going to be able to pass the ball? Is it going to be pretty one-dimensional with Ca'lil Valentine in that running game? If Illinois underperforms, and this is a game that is genuinely seen like Purdue can compete, it's a must-win game for Purdue in my eyes if they drop UCLA and Wake Forest. But this could also be, and this is the other way you look at it, kind of that middle ground. That scenario I threw out there where Purdue wins the first 2 against Indiana State and then Wake Forest, and now you're playing up against Illinois for an opportunity to be above 500 on the year. You play Minnesota the next week. You could genuinely start out 4-2. If Illinois isn't the team they were last year, which I don't think they will be, beating Illinois is an opportunity to start out 4-2 on the year. And that's insane to say from where this team was last year, but that truly is how the schedule leads out. It's better than I thought it was initially. Okay, let me put it that way, because initially you see Notre Dame, you see Illinois, and it's the same thing last year. You have that turn in California week 3, Notre Dame, Illinois. That seems really tough. That seems like a schedule that is incredibly difficult. But look how it was last year compared to this year. USC with Jaden Maiava. Yes, that was a game Purdue competed in. 1,000 times out of 1,000, I would rather play UCLA on the road with a new head coach in week 3 than USC. That's a better game. Notre Dame is Notre Dame. That doesn't change. Illinois takes a step back this year compared to where they were last year. Yes, Wake Forest is tougher than Southern Illinois, but overall, the front half of the schedule, there are a lot of winnable games. And I think it starts out those first 3 weeks, but you get to week 5 against Illinois, you see a team that has lost a lot of offensive production. They have some concerns on the offensive line. They've lost key defensive pieces like Gabe Jacas. This could be one of the toughest situations Brett Bielema has had in some time because the expectations are still sky high for the Illini. But I just don't know if he has the pieces in the scheme right now in order to live up to those expectations, which could create an interesting situation for Purdue in week 5 against the Illini. I'm not calling for an upset because I don't think it'll happen. All I'm saying is this will be a close game going into the second half. Illinois doesn't have the firepower they had last year to run away with it. It will be a close game. If Purdue can play their best football, they'll have a chance to win this one. That's not how I felt last year. I didn't think there was a chance for Purdue to win this one last year. So I think the Boilermakers are in a better spot those first 5-6 games of the year to get out to a good start. And then with that momentum, who knows what could happen the backstretch of the season. So as I continue to look into these teams, as I continue to preview these games, just get more and more optimistic about what Purdue can do. And we're going to lead that into the final segment of today's show, our weekly edition a Boilermaker Buy, Sell, Hold. I'll be explaining that on the other side of the break coming up here next on Locked On Boilermakers. Baseball fans, if you think you know who's hitting a homer today, FanDuel's giving you a free chance to call your shot with daily dingers. It's easy to play. Just make your free pick for who you think will hit a home run in their game. If you're right, you'll receive a profit boost to use on your next bet for a chance at extra winnings. And best of all, you can make a free pick each day throughout the MLB season because daily dingers is another fun way to stay engaged with each day's games. Whether you're following your favorite team or keeping an eye on matchups across the league, each game has someone capable of going deep. Now you get the chance to make your prediction before first pitch. I've been using Jordan Walker all season long on daily dingers. Although my Cardinals aren't doing very good right now, Jordan Walker still continues to hit some dingers, which works well for me on FanDuel. Always have something to watch for. So are you ready to play your game today? Join all the action at FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com to play daily dingers and make your free pick on who's hitting a home run. Play ball and swing for the fences on FanDuel, an official partner of the MLB. Welcome to this week's edition of Boilermaker Buy, Sell, Hold. If you don't know, if you're just new, haven't seen this segment before here on Locked On Boilermakers, we're going to have 4 questions. Buy means I believe in something, that this is something that in my mind is going to happen. Sell means I don't believe it for a minute. And then hold is going to be, we're going to need to wait a little bit longer. We're going to need to push this into a future edition of Boilermaker Buy, Sell, Hold before we're able to answer that question. So I have 4 questions today. I want to get right into it with, is Illinois on upset watch in week 5 against Purdue? And I am going to go ahead and say sell for this one. I could say hold and see, hey, does Illinois drop a couple of their first 4 games? Does Purdue start out 2-2? Do they start out 3-1? Obviously, that's going to have some type of impact on if Purdue is going to put Illinois on upset watch. But as I sit here right now, I just don't think that that's extremely realistic. As I mentioned in the previous segment, Illinois loses a bunch of key pieces and they won't be the same team they were last year. But I still think that they're going to have enough size to be able to compete very well against Purdue and just wear out Purdue's defense over the course of a 60-minute game. You know, they're very big up front, bigger up front than what Purdue is going to look like. They've got a solid running game already established. So I think that'll wear out Purdue's defense come the second half. But for the first half, I think we're going to be believing that Purdue could upset this team, which is valuable and is what you want for Purdue fans out there to at least be tuned in and have the optimism, have the hope that Purdue could pull an upset. As of right now, I don't see that being realistic, but if the season progresses in a way where Illinois stocks down, Purdue stocks up, maybe I could change my tone on that. But as of right now, I don't think Purdue could beat Illinois. Second question I got is, if Purdue has the same record as last year, 2-10, would Barry Odom be fired? Man, I don't know. I'm going to say sell on this one as well. And the reason for that is because honestly, I just don't think Purdue wants to pay another buyout as of right now. Obviously, success for this year is dependent on, does Barry Odom look like the future of this program or does he not look like the future of this program, which is not the most positive place in the world to be at for a football program. Is your coach going to stay here next year or not? That's the success. But I don't think that outside of maybe losing to Indiana State, Barry Odom would be fired after this year, just because you want some stability. Even if the stability doesn't produce wins right away, I still think Barry Odom gets at minimum 3 years at Purdue. Now, I could be wrong. I'm not Tommy McClelland. I'm not the athletic director. I just know that Purdue doesn't want to pay another buyout. Obviously, you have to look at Ryan Walters, say he got 2 years. Well, same deal for Barry Odom, but he didn't inherit a lot at all from Ryan Walters. So in this year too, like not playing a team like Ball State where they are FBS but a mid-major, I think that helps his case if you go 2-10, because then at least you beat a Power 4 school or you beat a Big 10 school on top of that. So I would say outside of maybe going 1-11, I would say he might get fired. If you only beat Indiana State or if you lose to Indiana State, those will be the situations where Barry Odom gets fired. But if you beat one of those Power 4 schools, I think that he keeps his job into another year. Jaden Mangham, does he lead the team in interceptions? This is going to be one I buy. Jaden Mangham brought over in the transfer portal this year from Michigan. At Michigan State 2 years back, he had 4 interceptions before transferring to Michigan, dealt with some injury issues over there. This year, I think he's going to be a key piece of the secondary. There's really no denying that as of right now. He's already speaking to media, is already one of those guys that has a lot of respect from that coaching staff. Hadori Hines is one you can throw out there, 1 interception last year, but I view him as more of that coverage corner. That his claim to fame or his best ability is the fact that people don't want to throw the ball in his direction, which doesn't lead to those interception numbers, but also is great for what he needs to do, which is neutralize other wide receivers. For Jaden Mangham, I think he's going to be that ball hog once again this year. No interceptions the last couple of years, injury, and then last year played at Michigan, but just didn't get any interceptions. This year, I think those interception numbers go back up. Is it 4 again? Is it 5? I'm not sure what the number is, but I would say that Jaden Mangham will end up leading Purdue in interceptions come the end of this year. The final question I have is, will there be buzz? Will there be concern after the Indiana State game? And that's not me saying Purdue will lose to Indiana State. That's not saying will there be concern if Purdue loses to Indiana State. Obviously, that would be the case. But does Purdue go into Indiana State? Do they win convincingly enough that the story, the narrative here on the show the following Monday, in 2 weeks from today, on that episode, are we saying Purdue looked amazing, or are we saying this was concerning against Indiana State? And honestly, I'm going to sell that there will be concern against Indiana State. And the reason I say that is because last year, that game against Ball State, I thought Purdue was going to be special. That Ryan Browne to Armand Branch connection in game 1 against Ball State. And that was against a Ball State team that was an FBS program better than Indiana State. And it was also a year where Purdue had much less preparation. Barry Odom had to bring in over 50 guys in the transfer portal and just kind of had to mesh everyone together last minute. And Purdue still came out week 1 and played pretty strong against Ball State. I thought that Purdue looked better against Ball State than Indiana did against Old Dominion in week 1 last year. And then the Hoosiers end up winning a national championship. So I think that does speak well on Barry Odom, that this team always, or has at least 1 year, come out strong in week 1 and looked like a really good team no matter the competition, because you play who you play. You know, the schedule is the schedule. You play who you play. I don't care if it's Ball State, Indiana State. You got to take care of business. And I expect for Purdue to take care of business 2 Fridays, just 12 days. I think it's 12 days, maybe 11 days from today, depending on when this episode comes out, that Purdue plays off against Indiana State. I can't wait. So that's all we got for you guys today. I hope you enjoyed today's episode, getting into the defining games, a little bit of an Illinois preview as well, and Boilermaker buy, sell, hold. As always, it was a fun one. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you like, subscribe, and comment. All that really helps us out a ton as we want to continue growing on that platform. If you're listening on podcast, Apple Podcasts, whatever your preferred podcast platform is, make sure you leave 5 stars. That also really helps the show grow and get discovered. But that's all I got for you guys today. So until tomorrow, as always, boiler up, hammer down.